This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
The following episode of Charlotte Cooks is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up on this episode of Charlotte Cooks, we are in the kitchen with Chef Jamie Turner, and we are using forest mushrooms and red chocolate candies. Tune in and find out what we're up to. Welcome to this edition of Charlotte Cooks. I'm Chef Pamela Roberts, and in the kitchen today, I'm so excited to have Chef Jamie Turner joining us today. Jamie, what are we making?
We are making a vertical layer Yule log.
That sounds delicious. Now, it says vertical layer, so normally when we see our cakes, they have layers that kind of go this way.
Right.
These layers are going to go this way.
Right.
That sounds like a magic trick. Because we're doing a Yule log, some of the decorations that go on are things like meringue mushrooms. We're going to make some holly leaves, and we're going to use some red chocolate candies to make the little holly berries on there. So we have to make those meringues first, right?
Absolutely.
So how are we going to make the meringues? The meringues actually look like, we kind of teased y'all in the beginning. They're not really forest mushrooms, but they look like this, and you can make them out of egg whites and sugar.
For this episode, we're making 3 different types of meringues, but for the mushrooms, we're starting with Italian.
All right.
All right. So what we have here is the beginnings of a sugar syrup. In here we have our sugar, and we put just enough water to make it look like wet sand.
So not enough to make it swim, or just enough to barely cover it?
Yeah. While that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and pour my egg whites into the bowl, and we'll get that mixing. And the temperature we're looking for on an Italian meringue is 240. Once your sugar is about halfway there, you're gonna start whipping your whites, and we have a third little addition of sugar.
And that's all in your instructions, how you weigh it all out, right?
Yes.
And one thing, guys, when you're working on this sugar syrup for the meringue, you don't want to stir it.
Do not stir it. That is correct. That will start crystallization.
That's what I was going to say. Jamie, what will happen if you stir it? We get crystals in there.
Once your egg whites get a little bit foamy, you're going to go ahead and slowly add your second amount of sugar.
So your first amount of sugar is turning into a warm syrup, and this one is just added to the egg whites as they're whipping.
Right. And that is going to ensure that you don't burn your egg whites. It kind of gives you a little buffer.
There you go.
And we're just going to let our whites go. You want this to actually already be stiff peaked before you add your syrup. Okay?
So when you add your syrup, will it deflate your egg whites?
You're going to add it very slowly, so it shouldn't deflate. It should actually inflate. Okay. Because it's actually cooking the egg whites, and the release of steam, you're going to see the volume build. Temperature check. It's right there at 240.
Got it.
240. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to slow down our egg whites to a little less than medium speed. And we are slowly going to pour this hot sugar syrup into your egg whites. So we'll just let that go until it cools down.
And so what can you use Italian meringue for besides making our meringue mushrooms?
Oh, tons of things.
Yeah?
Yeah. Italian meringue buttercream is a wonderful...
So you would put butter in there?
Oh yeah, lots and lots of butter.
Yum, that sounds good.
It could also be used for the top of a lemon meringue pie.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
We are gonna let this mix for about 5 to 6 minutes. And while it's mixing, I'll go ahead and get my piping bag and shake it ready.
And we've got that right here for you.
All right.
So to prep your piping bag, we're using a disposable piping bag.
Yes.
A lot of people at home might have the cloth bags. Do you have to do anything special to a cloth bag?
Well, one thing you want to make sure when you're working with meringues is to not have any oil in your bag, or especially not in your bowl. One way to make sure you don't have any leftover oil residue is to just wipe it down with a little bit of apple cider vinegar.
There you go.
Or white vinegar, and that will get any grease residue. So,
because if there's oil there, your meringues aren't going to rise, are they? It's going to weight them down.
Right. All right, so we seal the bowl. Sometimes I like to use my wrist.
Oh, there you go. Kind of like testing baby bottles.
It's cooled down now considerably. It's kind of room temperature. And we'll just go ahead and stop it. All right.
Oh, it looks so pretty.
Woo!
Yeah, look how shiny, nice and shiny.
A trick when filling your bag, you're gonna fold it down almost more than halfway and stick your hand up underneath it and pull
That
it
way
down.
you keep the top of that bag nice and clean.
Nice, yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead.
So really, the meringue mushrooms are just a matter of piping them out into different shapes. Is that
Right.
it?
So
And
we're
then
gonna
putting
do
them together.
2 shapes: the base of the mushroom and the top of the mushroom. And we'll put them together after they are baked. Okay. So there you go. So when you fold it up,
It's nice and clean.
bag is nice and clean. So you might have noticed I did not cut the bag yet until I filled it, so that I didn't have meringue all over the place.
Because it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It would go right to the bottom and try to escape. All right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pipe the bottoms, and they're gonna look like little gumdrops. I'm gonna go straight up.
Oh, that's why you need a good stiff peak on there.
Yeah, there you go.
And so these become the stems of the mushrooms.
Right. And we're actually gonna stick the little tips into the bottom. That's how we're gonna connect to the top of the mushroom. And the tops are just round, nice even squeezes.
I like the way you twist that at the top.
Yeah.
Gives it a little characteristic. Let's get those into the oven.
All right, let's go.
There we go.
So we'll do 150 for 2 hours, turn off the oven, and just leave them there. Forget about them till tomorrow.
All right, and it's time to make our cake. So we're going to make what's called a chocolate roulade, which is basically a cake that can be rolled up. And if you do a normal cake mix, it won't roll so easy, will it?
No, not at all.
So there's something you leave out of this recipe than a normal cake recipe. Is that correct?
Right.
What are you leaving out?
Leavening agents.
There you go.
Right.
So to assemble this cake, she's going to do it very quickly, and then we're going to put it in the oven. And how long does it take to bake?
Only 6 minutes.
So it's very quick all the way around.
Yes.
Okay. So, and we don't do it in a traditional cake pan. We put it on a sheet pan. So to mix this cake, we're going to use
We're starting with 24 egg yolks.
24 egg yolks.
Yes. It's a very yolky cake.
That's a lot of yolks.
That is a lot of yolks.
Should we say no yolk? No.
That's no yolk. So we're taking our egg yolks and half of the sugar in the recipe.
Well, so 24 egg yolks, that's where you get all the whites to make your meringues.
Yes, and the buttercream.
And the buttercream. There you go.
Because we're only using 8 whites
in each recipe.
in the recipe for the cake. So
Good.
we have all those leftover whites for the rest of the
Now we're using
cake.
them somewhere.
All right, so we're gonna whip this with half the sugar until it is light and fluffy and pale in color. It'll actually, what we call in the kitchen is ribbon stage.
Ribbon, and that's where it sits on the top before it sinks.
Right, exactly. So we're just gonna let that go on high. While that's going, we're gonna take our dry ingredients, which isn't very many of them. It's our cocoa and our bread flour, and we're gonna just mix those together. We also added our salt with our cocoa and flour. In another bowl, if you are so blessed to have a second one, we are going to whip our egg whites with the other half of the sugar, but we're not going to start with the sugar in it. Just like we did with the meringue, we start adding the sugar once it's nice and foamy.
And that's making a simple meringue.
Exactly.
There we go.
Our
Ready?
yolks are ready.
Ooh, nice. Nice, nice, nice.
So, see how nice and thick that became,
Yes.
right?
Nice.
And that's what we call ribbon stage. All right. So we're just gonna let that sit and get our whites going. So we will get this going also on high. And we want to do the yolks first because of the fat content in them. It's okay to sit. They're not gonna lose volume while they sit.
Meringue will. Simple
Yes.
meringue will.
Egg whites, they'll
Yeah.
deflate very quickly. Okay, this is nice and foamy now, so we're gonna slowly add our sugar.
So what's the trick to making sure that you don't end up with a grainy meringue? How do you make sure that all those sugars are going to melt? Just slowly adding and whipping?
Yes, slowly adding it, yep, because if you dump it all in at once, it won't incorporate quick enough.
Right, okay.
It'll all kind of move around together. So we're going to whip this until stiff peaks. Okay, we have nice stiff peaks here. So let's go ahead and stop it. Let's do
look at that. That's awesome.
Let's do the peak test. Oh yeah, peaks all over the place. Now, the next step is to incorporate your whites into your yolks in 3 separate additions. So here's the first one, and we are gently folding. So we're going down the middle, bringing it around.
And why 3 stages?
Well, the first stage is just to lighten up the really heavy, fatty yolks. The second stage is where we get a lot more volume. So we want to treat these whites very gentle. And so by doing it in 3 stages, we're not just shocking the whites with the fat and yolks all at once.
Because if we put it all at once, they would just totally deflate. It would be too much for them. They just...
Before they're all mixed in, they would be deflated.
Yes.
Correct. All right, so there you go. Nice and uniform, all yellow. And now we are going to sprinkle your cocoa and flour mixture right over the top. And we'll do that in 2 additions. Here's the
So you
first.
do the egg whites in 3 additions, and then your dry ingredients, which is basically your flour and your cocoa, in 2 additions.
Exactly.
And once again, for the same principle,
Exactly.
not to completely deflate your egg whites or your yolks.
Starting to look chocolatey over here.
It is.
All right, let's go with our second addition. So this recipe is very heavily egg-based, but once you see how beautiful it rolls, you'll understand why we need all that delicious fat. I have a little trick when I'm spreading things that are really light and airy, is I spray underneath the parchment to keep its place.
There you go.
So I go around
That'll
the
hold it.
corners and an X in the middle, and that holds your parchment down. Because this is so light and airy, we have to move quick. We're gonna eyeball this, and how I do that is I look at my bowl, I kind of cut it in half, and then start scooping from that half. This is the one time you get to eyeball because you have to work fast, okay? So there's 1/2, and then you can just go with the second one. Feel free to go by, the look of it. That looks about 1/2 and 1/2. All right, so we're gonna spread these out nice and flat. So we push it out to the edges. Turn. Now your oven should be preheating.
And what temperature are we looking for?
We're looking for 375.
375.
We want our eggs to cook really fast and let off a lot of moisture. So it'll give you a nice fluffy cake. All right, so we're just gonna throw these in the oven in
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
We are now going to get ready to make a buttercream
Yes.
with the Swiss meringue. And then we're going to make a fudge frosting, which is going to go really quick. And then we're going to assemble these cakes because these are going to be ready to come out of the oven in just a couple minutes, aren't they?
Yes, they are. The first 2 ingredients we're gonna do is our egg whites and sugar into a large bowl. And we are going to whisk that together. And once it's nice and incorporated, we're going to put it over a double boiler and bring it to the temperature of 160 degrees. But here on this one, we're gonna continue whisking the entire time. It should take about 3 minutes to get up to 160. All right, so we've hit 160. It's nice and frothy and the sugar is all dissolved. And we'll go ahead, take it off of the steam right away and bring it over to our mixer. Right into the bowl.
It doesn't take a whole lot of time to do that Swiss meringue, does it? Just a few minutes or so.
Right. And
But you got to watch the temperature, don't you?
You do have to watch the temperature, and having your water boiling prior to starting helps it go faster. So we're gonna turn that on high. This will almost double or triple in volume. All right, this is nice and room temperature to the touch.
And use your wrist again.
Yeah, just like a baby bottle. So we're gonna add our butter. We're gonna do about 6 portions per pound. So that's going to be about 12 additions.
Do you have to wait in between each addition for it to get fully incorporated?
No. And we're gonna let that whip up. And we're also gonna add 1 tablespoon of really good vanilla. So we'll give that another minute to continue to whip up, and that is your Swiss meringue buttercream. Traditional Yule log flavors are mocha and chocolate. So we have our chocolate roulade. We're gonna make this buttercream mocha.
And so what are you using to make it mocha?
We are going to use instant coffee, and we're gonna take hot water and make a paste, and then add that into the buttercream. Okay, so our cakes are done. We are going to check for doneness. They should be nice and shiny and definitely firm in the middle, and pulling away from the sides lets you know it's definitely done. Are you ready to make some fudge icing?
I'm ready to make some fudge icing.
Okay, we have melted butter going into the mixing bowl.
And how much melted butter is that? About half a cup?
4 ounces,
4 ounces, yeah.
And we're gonna take our cocoa and add that to the melted butter. We're gonna paddle the melted butter and cocoa together.
So you got to do that, kind of get it started on low, so because it is a powder and a fat in there.
Absolutely.
So start it on low to get them incorporated, and then we're going to add.
Then we're gonna add our vanilla and our pinch of salt, and next we will slowly add 7 cups of powdered sugar. And lastly, you add 2/3 cup of milk. We'll just let that whip and mix until it's all comes together. So the first step in assembly is we are going to cut this into 4-inch strips, and it works out good because it's actually 12 inches across. So we're gonna do 3 strips. We're just gonna mark it at 4 inches, and then 8. And then we're gonna use our ruler as a guide.
Because we want nice straight lines.
Yes, we do. And just go back and forth. And once we have our strips cut, we are going to take our mocha buttercream and ice on top of the cut cake. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 scoops per strip.
And this is how you're going to get even layers, even stripes, because you're going to have equal amounts of cake and buttercream on each strip. Instead of just eyeballing it and doing it however you want.
So we're gonna get a nice even layer by continually turning your sheet pan and pushing from edge to edge. And now we're gonna take each strip and individually roll each strip. So we're gonna get a nice tight roll.
And you're leaving the parchment behind, obviously.
Yes, we don't want parchment. If it's sticking just a little, you can use your spatula to kind of push it and get it started. You might be able to start and see it come together. So once we get
Ding, 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 ding.
to the end of this roll, here's your first one, okay? And we're gonna just keep going now with your second one. And I'm just gonna go right underneath to make sure it's all apart. And you see that right there? That's where we're gonna start our second one. So we'll meet it up. And we're gonna use all 6, and we will end up with an 8-inch round. So what we're gonna do is we're going to chill this for about an hour. So we're going to take some of our mocha buttercream and put that right on top. And that's gonna be like the top of our Yule log. You know, you usually see the inside of a log. I'm just gonna smooth that out. Then we can bring it down a little bit to the sides, but the sides are going to be covered with fudge icing. We are going to start by placing it onto the side of the cake, push back and forth, and while we're turning the turntable, and we're just going to smear this decadent, delicious icing, fudge icing, on the side of the cake. And you can be really generous with this. Then we're gonna use upward strokes to make it look like bark once we get it all on. And we also have bark.
And the bark is just melted chocolate, and you just melt the chocolate. You melt the chocolate in a microwave, and then just smear it out on a piece of parchment paper and just put it in the refrigerator. And then you're gonna peel it off in large chunks, and that's going to become part of the bark on the side of the cake as well.
So you just break it off. It's gonna, it doesn't have to look neat. It's literally just little pieces of bark.
And it's supposed to look like a rustic piece of wood, so it doesn't have to be perfect, clean edges.
Exactly.
We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for something that mimics a piece of wood you find in the woods.
Okay, so the next step is to put some of your fudge icing into a piping bag. And we're gonna make the rings of the tree. So we're just gonna go in circular motions around the top of the cake and then use our spatula to just smear those in. You can tell how old a tree is by how many...
By counting the rings.
Yeah, by how many fudge rings it has. I took some buttercream and I put some green color into it. With your Swiss meringue buttercream, it's best to use gel colors, not your liquid.
Right.
There's so much fat in it that it won't incorporate well if you use liquid colors that you can get at your regular grocery store. And we are going to make some holly leaves, and we're going to use red chocolate candies for our holly berries. And we have our mushrooms that we made earlier.
Right.
Okay, so let's get our mushrooms out of the
Here's
oven.
our mushrooms all dried.
And
nice
those are
and ready.
super simple to put together. You're just going to take your tops. You can use a scissor or a paring knife and put a little hole in it.
Be careful not to go all the way through it.
Right.
You just want to make a little hole in the bottom. And that's so you can take one of these and stick that in there.
Exactly. And there you
go.
have
Isn't
your
that the
little
cutest little
mushroom.
thing? It's just adorable.
I'm going to put some of that green buttercream that I made into a piping bag. You don't even have to buy a leaf tip. It's 2 snips of your paper bag, and you just make the top of your bag in the shape of a V, 2 45-degree angles, and there you go. It's a leaf tip. So we're just gonna squeeze.
It's looking more foresty by the minute.
And a couple at the bottom. All right. The addition of holly berries. And sticking on our mushrooms. And you can't have a Yule log without a little snow.
So a little powdered sugar on there.
There you go. The secret to getting a perfect slice of cake is using hot water and dipping your knife in it, drying it off. And now we reveal.
I want to see these vertical layers.
Got one slice. And cleaning your knife every time. Look at that.
We've got the little berries on the back. We've got the nice vertical stripes. All that work. And look at that beautiful striped cake coming out of there. So, ladies and gentlemen, look at this. We have everything you need now to make your own vertical stripe Yule log cake at home. You know how to make the magic mushrooms, you know how to make the holly leaves and the berries. So go ahead and make this for the next holiday dinner you have coming up, because everybody's going to be surprised by those vertical stripes. Thank you for watching this episode of Charlotte Cooks, and Jamie, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
If you want her recipes, send me an email at pamela.roberts@cpcc.edu or check them out on our website at pbscharlotte.org, and we will catch you next time on Charlotte Cooks. Thanks for watching.
production of PBS Charlotte.